The Great Pyramid of Giza has been standing in the Egyptian desert for somewhere between 4 and 5,000 years. That's a long time to keep a secret. And yet, if you sit with the archaeology long enough, really sit with it, you start to notice that a lot of what we say with confidence about this structure is actually far less settled than the textbooks suggest. Not because there's anything supernatural going on, but because the evidence, when you look at it honestly, leaves a lot of open questions that haven't been satisfactorily answered. That's what we're going to talk about today. Not theories, not conspiracy, just the actual evidence, the actual gaps in the record, and some of the serious research that mainstream archaeology has been slow to engage with. The conventional story most of us learned goes something like this. Around 2550 BC, the Egyptian Pharaoh Khufu ordered the construction of the Great Pyramid as his royal tomb. It took roughly 20 years to build. Tens of thousands of workers moved and stacked approximately 2.3 million blocks of stone using copper tools, wooden sleds, and ramps. When it was finished, it stood as the tallest man-made structure on Earth, a title it held for nearly 4,000 years. It's a reasonable story, and parts of it are probably true. But here's the thing that serious researchers keep coming back to. When you ask for the primary evidence supporting this account, not the interpretation, but the actual documented evidence from the time of construction, the record is surprisingly thin. There are no inscriptions from Khufu's era that clearly state he built this pyramid. There are no papyrus records describing the construction process in detail. There are no administrative documents listing the workforce, the quarry sites, or the logistics. For a civilization that recorded almost everything, harvests, religious rituals, royal decrees, land disputes, the construction of their most ambitious project is essentially unrecorded. That's worth pausing on. Now, the absence of records doesn't prove the pyramid wasn't built by Khufu. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, as the saying goes. Records can be lost. Papyrus decays, tombs get robbed, and documents disappear. But when you combine the missing records with some of the other anomalies inside the pyramid itself, the picture gets more complicated. Consider the purpose of the structure. Every other royal tomb we found in Egypt has a recognizable profile, hieroglyphic inscriptions glorifying the pharaoh, painted walls and ceilings, grave goods, the objects and treasures the king was meant to carry into the afterlife, and at the center of it all, the mummified remains of the person the tomb was built for. The Great Pyramid has none of that. Inside the so-called king's chamber sits a large open granite coffer. No lid, no inscriptions on the walls, no artifacts of any kind that suggest a royal burial, and no body, not even fragmentary remains, or any biological trace of Khufu. Egyptologists generally explain this by suggesting the tomb was robbed in antiquity, possibly thousands of years ago. That's plausible. Tomb robbery was rampant throughout ancient Egyptian history. But it doesn't fully resolve the question, because even in robbed tombs, things get left behind. Wall paintings survive. Broken fragments of grave goods remain. And crucially, other Egyptian tombs, even heavily looted ones, bear the inscriptions that identified whose tomb they were. The Great Pyramid has none of that identifying material anywhere inside it. There's also the question of the granite coffer itself. It's too large to have been brought through the existing entrance passages, which means it had to have been placed inside the chamber during construction, before the roof was finished. That level of planning is consistent with a purpose-built installation, something designed to be there permanently from the beginning. But what it was designed for, no one has convincingly explained. Set aside the historical record for a moment and look at the physical structure itself, because this is where the questions get genuinely interesting from a scientific standpoint. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with a margin of error of just 0.05 degrees. That's an accuracy that several modern buildings, surveyed with GPS and laser equipment, don't achieve. The base of the pyramid, covering 13 acres of desert, is level to within 2 centimeters across its entire surface. That's not rough construction, that's precision engineering. Inside the structure, particularly in the granite-lined King's Chamber and the connecting passages, researchers have documented something that doesn't sit comfortably with the copper tools narrative. Engineer Christopher Dunn spent years analyzing the granite work inside the pyramid. Granite is an extremely hard stone. Copper, the primary metal available to Bronze Age Egyptians, is significantly softer. When a copper tool strikes granite repeatedly, the copper deforms and wears down long before it makes a clean, precise cut in the stone. What Dunn found in the pyramid were drill cores, cylindrical bores through granite, that showed a perfectly consistent circular cut. The spiral grooves left by the drilling process moved through the granite at a rate that, by his calculations, was 50 times faster than what modern diamond-tipped drill bits achieve in similar stone today. Now, Dunn's conclusions have been disputed, and he's not a mainstream archaeologist, but his actual measurements and observations have never been convincingly refuted. Nobody has demonstrated, under controlled conditions, how ancient Egyptian workers achieved those specific drill marks using the tools they're supposed to have had. Several modern experiments have attempted exactly that. Teams using authentic Bronze Age tools, copper chisels, stone pounders, have worked on granite under documented conditions. The results, to put it charitably, don't match what we see inside the pyramid. The tools deteriorate quickly. Progress is minimal. The precision simply doesn't emerge. That doesn't tell us what the ancient builders did use. But it does tell us that the conventional explanation has a gap in it. There's also something small but persistently puzzling about the interior spaces. The chambers and passages deep within the pyramid, spaces that workers would have occupied for extended periods during construction, show no traces of soot, smoke residue, or any combustion byproduct on the walls or ceilings. If you've spent time in ancient caves or tunnels where oil lamps or torches were historically used, you know what that leaves behind. The black staining is permanent. It soaks into limestone and stays there for millennia. The pyramid's interior simply doesn't have it. That means either the builders had a light source that produced no smoke, which raises its own questions, or the spaces were finished and sealed without workers ever being inside them for extended periods. Neither explanation maps neatly onto the conventional construction narrative. In the early 1990s, a German engineer named Rudolf Gantenbrink was given permission to explore narrow shafts inside the Queen's Chamber. These shafts, about 8 inches square, had generally been assumed to be symbolic passages with no functional purpose, leading nowhere. Gantenbrink sent a small robotic camera through one of these shafts. About 200 feet in, the robot's camera revealed a small limestone slab fitted into the tunnel, complete with 2 copper fittings, handles essentially, set into its surface. This was significant for several reasons. Metal fittings inside a shaft that was supposedly decorative and non-functional suggested that something beyond that door was considered worth protecting, or at minimum worth marking. The discovery attracted attention worldwide. Then, the investigation was halted by Egyptian authorities. No clear explanation was given at the time. Nearly a decade passed. In 2002, a team with National Geographic sponsorship returned and drilled a small camera hole through Gantenbrink's door. Behind it was another sealed stone slab. A second door, just a short distance behind the first. That second door has never been opened. Access has not been granted. We don't know what's behind it. That's not a conspiracy, that's just a fact. And it's a frustrating one, because the technology to investigate that space non-invasively, without damaging anything, has existed for years. Then in 2017, something larger came to light. A team of international researchers used a technique called muon radiography to scan the interior of the pyramid from the outside. Muons are subatomic particles produced by cosmic rays. They pass through matter at predictable rates, and by measuring variations in that passage, you can map density differences inside a large structure, essentially a non-invasive X-ray. The team found a previously unknown void above the Grand Gallery, a large empty space, its dimensions rivaling the known internal chambers of the pyramid, with no visible entrance and no known purpose. This was reported in the journal Nature. It was peer-reviewed. It was not fringe science. An exploration of that void has not been permitted. The Great Sphinx sits about a quarter mile from the Great Pyramid. It's carved from the natural limestone of the Giza Plateau, a recumbent lion with a human face, approximately 240 feet long and 66 feet high. Official Egyptology dates its construction to around 2500 BC, linking it to the Pharaoh Khufu, based largely on proximity to his pyramid and a supposed facial resemblance between the Sphinx and a statue of Khufu found nearby. In the early 1990s, Boston University geologist Dr. Robert Schoch began studying the erosion patterns on the Sphinx's body and the walls of the enclosure it sits in. Schoch's specialty is rock weathering, and what he observed didn't match the erosion profile caused by wind and sand, the expected agents of weathering in a desert environment. The erosion was rounded, undulating, and deep, the characteristic signature of water erosion, specifically from prolonged and heavy rainfall working on the stone over an extended period. Schoch presented this analysis to the Geological Society of America, and his findings were supported by other geologists in attendance. The problem, and it's a significant one, is that the Sahara has not seen the kind of sustained rainfall required to produce that weathering profile since approximately the end of the last ice age, somewhere around 10 to 12,000 years ago. If Schoch is correct, and the geological argument is substantive, then either the Sphinx is considerably older than mainstream Egyptology accepts, or its lower body was carved from an existing natural formation that predates the 2500 BC construction date by thousands of years. The standard Egyptological response to Schoch's work has not been to refute the geology. It's been to point out that an older Sphinx contradicts the established timeline, which is not technically a counter-argument. It's worth being honest about the state of this debate. Schoch's interpretation isn't universally accepted. Some geologists have proposed alternative explanations involving subsurface water or unusual local conditions, but the alternative explanations have their own weaknesses, and Schoch's core observations, the profile of the erosion itself, have not been explained away. This matters because if the Sphinx is significantly older than 2500 BC, it opens a question that archaeology hasn't been comfortable asking. Who was here, and what did they know before the civilization we call ancient Egypt? In the 1990s, researcher Robert Bauval noticed something about the layout of the three main pyramids at Giza that he found difficult to dismiss as coincidence. The three pyramids, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, are not in a straight line. Menkaure is offset to the east, relative to the other two. When Bauval mapped this arrangement against the night sky, he found that the positions of the pyramids mirror the three stars of Orion's belt with striking accuracy, including the offset of the third, smaller star. But the match isn't exact for 2500 BC. Due to a slow astronomical phenomenon called precession, the gradual wobble of Earth's axis over a 26,000-year cycle, the stars' positions shift slowly over millennia. Bauval calculated that the ground layout of the Giza pyramids most precisely matches Orion's belt, as it appeared in approximately 10,500 BC. Again, the same rough time window as the geological evidence from the Sphinx. Orion held deep significance in Egyptian religious cosmology. It represented Osiris, associated with death, resurrection, and the eternal cycle. The idea that the Giza complex was designed to reflect a specific celestial configuration, and that this configuration was set not to the present day, but to a specific point in the deep past, has serious astronomical support, even if its implications are uncomfortable for the conventional timeline. Bauval's theory has been criticized, primarily on the grounds that the match isn't perfect, and that you can find correlations between almost any set of 3 points and some arrangement of stars if you look hard enough. That's a fair methodological caution. But critics have also not fully accounted for the specific choice of Orion, the cultural significance of that constellation in Egyptian religion, and the convergence with other independent lines of evidence pointing to the same era. So where does all of this leave us? The honest answer is, with more open questions than most popular accounts of the pyramids are willing to acknowledge. The Great Pyramid was built with a precision that we cannot fully replicate using the tools its builders are supposed to have had. Its interior shows physical evidence, drill cores, cut marks, absence of soot, that doesn't fit the conventional construction narrative. It contains at least one large hidden space that has never been explored. It has sealed passageways behind which we have no idea what sits. The Sphinx beside it shows geological weathering consistent with an age far greater than mainstream archaeology accepts. And the layout of the entire Giza complex encodes an astronomical alignment that points to a moment in time thousands of years before Khufu. None of this definitively proves that a lost civilization built these structures, or that ancient Egyptians had access to technologies we haven't identified, or that the official timeline is wrong in every particular. But it does mean the settled, confident story most of us absorbed in school is more of a working hypothesis than a proven fact, and a working hypothesis that discourages further investigation, that treats the questions as settled when they clearly aren't, is not good science. The Giza Plateau may hold answers to questions about human history that are genuinely important. We have the technology to look for those answers non-invasively, carefully, and responsibly. What's been lacking, so far, is the institutional willingness to ask. These structures have been standing for 5,000 years. They'll stand for another 5,000. The question is whether we'll spend that time defending what we think we know, or actually trying to find out. Thanks for watching. If this is the kind of careful, evidence-based exploration you're interested in, there's more where this came from. Subscribe if you'd like to follow along.